I represent
Good is good.
precinct 4.
Good is good.
Oh,
Anybody need an agenda? Doesn't have one?
I'll take one, Doug. Sure.
You Steve?
Thanks for
I thought you
making that post.
unfamiliar face. Glad to meet you.
It reminded me to go to my old.
I'm with Roger.
I'm just glad I left.
Hey, Yeah, we're gonna circulate one just once we get folks here.
It'd be nice.
Hard to imagine.
It's been a year. I know, you guys have only aged a year since I last saw you. Exactly. Oh, thanks. Got a few more crow's feet. What a year. Strange year.
Steve's here. Hey. How are you?
Got an agenda? You got more than one? Are you stealing everybody else?
Yeah, what's the school?
I don't know, maybe, we're always asking for money.
Did you say you were sad?
You know, Franklin, Stephen, and Josh.
Was that the?
He said he said he was here.
I kind of had a pause for that long, because I had a lot of family stuff I had to take care of. Yeah. The whole thing. We decided, well, we decided basically broad scope. And so, kind of like, well, we already had a plan back in the drawing board. And this time I decided I'm hiring.
Probably choke on trying to swallow the cat.
Yeah.
Fire.
All right, good afternoon.
For the weekend, so now we can.
This is the Kendall County Boerne Fair Oaks Transportation Study Committee meeting. I appreciate y'all being here today. We've only been suspended for a year and 1 month, something like that. So this is a restart meeting. It's very likely, obviously some things have changed since the last time we met, but because of that we may stumble or do a little shuffle here, but I think we're ready, everybody's ready to get started again. A couple of introductions that people you may not know. Steve Sharma down there you're representing the EDC. Steve is with Rodriguez Transportation Group, so he brings professional expertise as well as business expertise. I'm glad to have you with us, Steve. Just to review, there are some members of the committee that are no longer with us that have said they couldn't participate, or they've changed the jobs, or they're no longer members of the organization that they were representing, so we'll go over that shortly. To begin with, I thought it would be good to introduce a new scribe. Elena Tucker had been doing our very detailed minutes, and so we have with us Erica Yount.
Yeah, good job, just right.
She's with the city of Boerne, and we appreciate her being with us today. You might want to take your name tag and your name placard and just orient it to where she can see who you are.
Thank you all so much.
So we look forward to Erica's assistance as we move forward and get started again. In that same vein, I want to thank the city of Boerne for their hospitality. Even though they already got shuffled once, we were going to meet in the training room, but I think this works fine. I don't know if we've got a permanent location
We're
yet.
still working on that. There's another meeting that was scheduled right after this.
Okay.
It was UDC Stormwater for the UDC committee, and we wanted to have time to sandpile
Okay.
and whatnot, so we
So, thank you very much. We appreciate the great facilities. We've always appreciated the city of, Boerne ISDs, and this just seemed like the right thing to do since it's now online. Bob, you want to go over any of these others, governance matters, governance?
I guess just to remind everybody what we all agreed as terms of engagement. And by the way, it's nice to be back together, huh?
Yeah.
This has been a bizarre year. You've probably heard or read, we are being deeply encouraged by the Commissioners Court and the mayors to re-engage again on the things they need. As the mayor put it in his mayor's minute, a long list of projects that the citizenry of the community wants to see acted upon. So we've got a charge, and it's good to get back in the saddle and get on with it. So it's been a heck of a year. For those of you that have been part of this, we're not an official government entity. We're a bunch of citizens who are just agreeing to come together at the behest of these other places and get together, but we're trying to be unprecedentedly open about our business, so we're behaving as though we are a public entity. We're publicly noticing our agendas and our meetings.
Except for this one, I don't think I got it noticed in time.
Oh, no. Adjourned. We're going to have a couple of citizen comment periods at every meeting. We're going to have very detailed meeting minutes that go to the website, and they'll be memorialized there forever, so that we're able to capture the essence of discussions and conversations, not just the recorded votes on how things were dealt with. We early on decided that Don or I, as co-chairs, will have a vote on anything that this committee issues. We just felt like that was things that have gone before this attempt at a transportation effort have been tainted by a number of weird accusations and inflammatory topics and the way things were handled by what agencies, and we're just trying to be awfully pure around transparency and not being heavy-handed and not handing down dictates from anybody else. So we won't be voting, and well, I guess I'm getting ahead of the agenda. That's the governance things that were, I think, important to remind ourselves of. And I'm sure today's meeting will be rather ragged because we're all trying to figure out how to exactly do this stuff. So back to you.
One other thing, we had adopted, as you recall, a modified consensus decision-making model. We had 20 members of the committee. We agreed that we would make decisions by consensus, if at all possible. But if we got to a position where somebody felt like we were stuck and couldn't get to consensus, that a member of the committee could make a motion that we move to a modified consensus. That motion, in order to move to modified consensus, would need to be approved by 2/3 or 14 members of the committee. And then if that prevailed or passed, then we would move to the issue, and then we would vote on that issue. And for that issue to be approved, or the motion to pass, we would need 14 again. Now, the minutes I reviewed said 14, and it didn't say 2/3. So if, in the absence of 20 members, I mean, we barely have enough to pass it, to take unanimous passage by somebody that's here. So we may want to consider that going forward, but I'll let y'all think about that a little bit more. Any other questions about governance and schedule and where we're going to meet? We do hope to meet twice a month on the first and third Tuesdays, which are the off Tuesdays when Commissioners Court, and I think City Council meets on the second and the fourth. So hopefully this won't impose on us too much in city staff.
Again, at 2 p.m.
That's good for me. That was the proposal. It's open for discussion. Sounds like 2 p.m. is a consensus.
Good for everybody that's here. People that aren't here, it might be weird.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and circulate a membership list here. And if you would, fill out your phone number, your primary email, and your, what's the other one called, the secondary email?
The committee,
The committee email, and indicate which one is your preferred email address you may have changed. And so we'll get everybody up to snuff on that. Some of the, just to review that, Kendall County Precinct 2 had been filled by Bob Hartwig. And Bob has moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. On a sad note, I also, Travis brought to my attention that Bob's wife passed away last week, was it? So if you know Bob and have his contact information, you might want to send him a card or reach out to him, express your condolences. David Anderson had been representing Precinct 3. Dave kind of withdrew as we were wrapping up last time and has said that he did not want to participate any further. Both Commissioner Elkins and Commissioner Chapman are working on replacements for those two. Tim Banwolf, who is not here today, has had another conflict, but he did say that he would like to continue. City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Dan Banks has said that he's got some things going on. He's completely retired now, but he would like to withdraw from the committee and he's supposed to drill some more wells or something. Marcus Garcia, who's not with us today.
Don, if we could back up, was that appointment through city council, and do we think we're gonna wait till after the election, since there'd be a change in leadership with the mayor?
I think so. Mayor Menezes is elected not to run. We have, Mayor Handren wanted to have a steering committee meeting last week of the steering committee chairs, or steering committee members, which is Mayor Handren, Judge Lux, and Mayor Menezes. We weren't able to do that because of Judge Lux's mother's passing.
Right.
And so, once we get together, I think Mayor Menezes or somebody will lay out a process for us to get a replacement for that. Kim Bloom, as many of you may know, is with child. And she said she will start with us, but she's not sure how long she's going to be able to continue. So that's still up in the air. We've introduced Steve Sharma already. Rankin to Spain and Steven Zeller, I think both said they would continue to participate, but I don't know where they are today. Boerne ISD has been vacant, Rich, and so I assume y'all will.
Henry Acosta wants to be the
Okay.
representative. He's our director of facilities. He'd be a valuable addition.
Okay.
I have a number of them, so I'm gonna call Bill and let him know.
And Josh Limmer, who wasn't very active, is with Comfort ISD. I can check with them. I haven't heard one way or another about Josh. So those are, that's our committee, and we will move forward with getting replacements and hopefully sooner rather than later.
Apologies if I missed it. Wasn't Ben Bunker on our committee too?
Ben was the EDC representative.
Okay.
He's left that, and Steve is his
I
replacement.
didn't pick up on that, thanks.
We're now at the time for public comment. See, we have two members of the public with us today. One's Can't see yourself up there, newspaper?
Nope, nothing.
Okay.
Nothing, Travis, nothing to see here.
Travis Sabine, just interested in transportation for all my life, and I'm the ever-present advocate for roundabouts and sidewalks.
And what precinct is he living in?
Precinct 4. Okay, any other? No, that's it. All right. Back in October, was it? When were we contacted and encouraged to come up with an interim?
Yeah, I think it was October.
Bob and I were called on the carpet by the steering committee, and I said, look, guys, transportation planning goes on, and we know you can't meet. We need some initial recommendations because the MPO's call for projects is up, and we need some basis on which to make a recommendation. So we said, well, let's pull together a study committee and see if we can come up with what we perceived was the consensus recommendations of the group. And so Bob and I did that. We drafted a report, or actually we pulled together several committee members. Some of them are here. The ad hoc committee was Bob and I. Ben Eldridge was on that, Marcus Garcia, Bob Hartwig, Northern, you were there on that committee, John Kite, Gary Louie, and Rick Sena. We pulled together a report, presented it to the city council and to commissioners court. And so I think that it was well received, but I think just to wrap this up and do things correctly, I'd like for us to go ahead and make a brief presentation to you, what we presented to both of those entities. And I'd like to get some consensus from the committee that this is appropriate, there needs to be additional work, or there's something in there that's not appropriate. So, if you'll just bear with me, I think it takes, what's this, Bob? 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Something like that. Well,
Bear-
there's 0 questions.
Barrett, are you going to manage the slides from there? Okay. This is just basically background of the committee. We were formed in September 2019. We met 12 times over the subsequent 5 months. We focused on developing our recommendations, and y'all are familiar with all of that. We suspended our work in March of 2020, and then in December it was, we were asked to make recommendations. So we said this is an interim report, and that there's a lot left to do as we move forward. Next slide, please. We felt like it was important to lay out for the 2 entities that we were presenting to our principles. First, that it be locally driven, that we'd be committed to transparency, openness, and inclusiveness, that we'd be data-driven. We talked about how we organized ourselves into some subcommittees, those being the past studies subcommittee, the public outreach subcommittee, a GIS subcommittee, subject matter experts, and appropriate economic development. And admittedly, some of those have not been very active yet, but some of them have been. We remind you that we do have 2 really great internet-based tools. The website, www.kcbtfotc.com, and then there's a crowdsource viewer that you can access and plan your mobility. There hasn't been a lot of activity on that since we suspended for obvious reasons. I think people had other things to look at, but they're still there, and I think they still are available for comment. Is this about where we had the ball
No.
off? Oh, okay. Did
You-
I stepped on your toes, didn't I?
No, when you get to the burning project.
Okay. We noted that funding for transportation comes primarily from local funds, regional funds, and state and federal funds. Local funds being general revenue, or we can have debt in terms of bond issue, or we can have dedicated revenue streams. Kind of like the vehicle registration surcharge that the county uses, or other dedicated revenue streams. Regional funds can be generated by regional mobility authorities. We do not have one in Kendall County, although there is one in Boerne County, the Alamo Area Regional Mobility Authority. There are several, I think 7 others throughout the state. Generally, they raise money by tolls, toll revenues, but there may be some other opportunities as well. There are also state and federal funds which flow into communities primarily through TxDOT, the Alamo Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the Alamo Regional Rural Planning Organization, which is managed by came up with, basically 8 project recommendations for which we said should go, be taken responsibility for by the county, for by the city, and then we had 4 non-project recommendations. And we didn't start out with 4, 4, and 4, but it just turned out that way.
Well, the projects are listed right here. The first few are gonna be county projects, so I'll punt it back to Don, but there are the 8 projects, and you should recognize all but one of those. There's one that did surface that hadn't had airtime in our committee, but emerged as pretty clearly a necessity rather than a desire. And for the sake of the scribe, you can just reference this interim presentation, because we did make it to council and the commissioners. So in its entirety, it's already out there.
The first one for the county is Scenic Loop Road from I-10 to Boerne back. Boerne back, of course, is a development in southeastern Kendall County. This is there's a development agreement between the city of Boerne and the developer wherein they will make some improvements to Scenic Loop Road to their northern property terminus, which is kind of where the white line at the southern part of Scenic Loop Road ends. And so somebody will need to fund some improvements from that northern terminus up to I-10, which is now basically a 2-lane roadway. And I believe that what we said was that we should make that project an MPO project, trying to seek funding from the MPO. Scenic Loop is a functionally classified roadway and is eligible for surface transportation block grant funding. And we would provide, the county should provide 20 to 40% of the funding from either general revenue or bond issues. And we said the section that we would put there would match whatever section the developer was building, which I believe was two 12-foot lanes in each direction with a 14-foot wide left, dual left turn lane, and 4-foot paved shoulders. Next project. And on that Scenic Loop project, by the way, we don't expect that would be funded anytime soon. It has not been submitted by the county yet, but we expect that once we look at the cost of it and do some additional analysis and kind of button it up, present it to AMPO, that we might be able to get it on the list. The second one is the IH-10 eastbound exit, exit, which is to Joshua Springs Park and the Youth Agricultural and Equestrian Center, as well as the frontage road from Sharp Bend there, Joshua Springs, down to the Boerne Welfare, basically building the rest of the access road. This helps people get to that recreational complex in a lot more coherent and less confusing fashion. And it eliminates a very sharp radius curve at Joshua Creek, which is not easily negotiated by 18-wheelers that use the rock quarry or people pulling livestock trailers as they approach the Yak. We thought that we might need to put a little bit of match towards that. There are some other alternatives that address part of the problem. Basically, it's widening the bridge, but we felt like we need to put this on the list as an important development project down the road. The next one is the SH-27 and FM-473 Roundabout in Comfort. This has been talked about quite a bit. There's pretty good consensus that this is a very confusing intersection that would lend itself to being simplified through the installation of a roundabout. I think TxDOT may have started looking at that. There's been no official submittal, but I think they're like, well, maybe so. And the last one is one that has not risen to the, become a subject of the committee, but became apparent as the city and the county were talking about first how the phasing of the Interstate 10 improvement project was going to be handled, and the conversion of the eastbound frontage road from two-way to one-way operations. And when you do that, traffic going north on Upper Balcones will be able to go up to what is now the existing frontage road that is in front of Chili's, and they'll be able to approach Highway 46 and turn right like they're going to HEB, but they will not be able to turn left when everything's completed. And so they'll have to go across the bridge, and if they want to go to Bandera, then they have to turn around somewhere within the city of Boerne and come back and go the other way. So we felt like it may be, we think that what will happen is Hoffman Road, which is shown in red, will become the cut through to 46 for people wanting to go to Bandera Road. And so we said we needed to go ahead and put this on the list. This is mostly in the city, excuse me, in the county, but there is a little bit of that that is within the city of San Antonio. Excuse city of Boerne. Too many years I said that. So we think the county should go ahead and take this one on. The city's taking on Old San Antonio Road, and we should take this one on. Bob, you can take it.
Okay.
You can't see that.
Well, all right, this project is labeled Old San Antonio Road. It actually goes down and includes the terminus down at Scenic Loop, Cascade Caverns, and all that mess. And it basically involves widening Old San Antonio, dealing with some of the low water crossings that John Kite's been raising as a real important life safety need for quite some time. Just making it, because when the I-10 access road, which it's already happened, is becoming one-way, that road's going to just be increasingly used as a southerly thoroughfare for people wanting to go to San Antonio or whatever. So the demand on that road is going to be unrecognizably greater, and we need to get it done. We need to get it right. The south end of that, any of us that have ever driven anywhere near that intersection know what a mess that whole thing is. So there was the proposal that we offered as an interim involved addressing that in quite a comprehensive way, but the first phase being a bunch of engineering studies and just getting the planning right so that we had better ideas of cost estimates and timing and prioritization and whatnot. As an aside, a portion of this project has made its way onto the city of Boerne's application for TxDOT funding. The southern end, the terminus at Scenic Loop, Cascade Caverns, all of that part is now AMPO, okay. And so that all has made its way into an application, and we were asked to be one of the organizations offering support, and we did, with the caveat that our interim recommendation also included Old San Antonio Road itself, and that's not a part of what got submitted. I was told a few minutes ago that was primarily because in meetings with the funding agency, it was clear what would and would not receive attention and potential funding, so they submitted what looked like it had the best chance. Now, but as our recommendation letter expressly said, we as a committee certainly hope the rest of that gets picked up in due course, because it's part of the same problem. You can't fix half of it without fixing the other. Next. Another roundabout. I think we've all talked this one just almost to death. Up where School Street, Adler, and Main converge. We've just been begged on crowdsourcing to do anything up there. There are developments taking place up there that Rich Sena suggested that would make this area really a topic for discussion about extending, connecting the old number 9 trail system, sidewalk system, whatnot, just make it a broader mobility project than just a road. And again, it would be city funded. But that's kind of it. I mean, I think it's just a perfect example of the use of a roundabout to solve congestion. Once people get used to it, I think it'll be a real time saver and safety measure.
To add an update to that, last week at City Council, they authorized some mid-year budget adjustments.
Mhm.
And one of our line items was a schematic study of this location.
Right.
So we've already reached out to the consultant and have started that. We have a consultant that's put together a roundabout schematic previously, but he's going to go to the next level of that schematic. That'll be something we'll have for the next handful of months.
Awesome, because I think if there's a project this committee's talked about that would have rave reviews in the committee, this would be it.
And we spoke, so everyone's aware, we spoke with TxDOT. So just like the city applied for MPO funding, TxDOT also applies for MPO funding. And we tried to talk TxDOT into both of us submitting on this together, and TxDOT didn't want to touch this. TxDOT is very concerned of the environmental of the gas station. Our consultant and TxDOT's consultant thinks we have to buy the gas station to make this work, and they didn't want to have underground fuel tanks as part of the MPO.
They've never done that before.
They do, it'd be a very tough win in the submittal process, so they didn't want to touch it. So what they told us is if we went to the next level of schematics, that when the next call for projects happens, 4 or 5 years from now, it'd be something that they could look at. That's definitely something, that's one of the reasons to the board.
And I think it's another reason this committee exists, that we are going to make recommendations in spite of outsiders telling us it can't be done.
Year.
We're not the decision makers, we're not the funders, but we are citizens who live here, who drive and walk around this place and know what we need. So that's it. Next project. Pedestrian crossing for old number 9 hike and bike path. Blanco Road, 474, whatever you want to call it. I know the city staff and council have been working on this exhaustively. I'm a little very unclear as to where it stands now, because I know it was controversial on anything that was being suggested or approved, so I might just ask staff or...
Sure. So we looked at all sorts of concepts, including a road diet of all of Blanco Road. Where we're currently sitting is TxDOT has unspecified signal projects, and we're trying to get a HAWK, which is a push-button pedestrian red light, into the unspecified project list. And we've offered a 10 or 20% match, I don't remember. 20%. Yeah, 20% match to make sure we get to the list like that as well. So that, all we're doing is the push-button red light this time.
That is music to my ears.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. Would that be a mandatory traffic must stop? Or is that a warning?
Yeah, it's a red light, not
Not
a yellow light.
Yeah, it's a red light, not the yellow light that we have on River Road. It's a red light that cars have to stop.
But it only goes red when somebody pushes the button.
Correct.
And it goes back to green forever until some other pedestrian pushes the button.
Well, it just flashes, I think. I don't think there's a green light.
It goes blank.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. I just don't see why they're not everywhere, but they're not. So that's great to hear. By the way, we didn't say it, but I think you're picking up a little subcurrent. While we've been adjourned, one of our members decided to just keep climbing the ladder and become city councilman. So Bryce Bodie.
It just happened.
I have a feeling you volunteered for
Yes.
that duty. So congratulations and welcome, and we're glad you can continue your service on
Thank you.
on this committee. So we have so we have a county commissioner and a city councilman. I think we can have our way with these people, right?
With me and Bryce?
Yeah, what's that?
Hey, while we were on the topic, I had a question regarding there was a separate city effort related to investigation of Blanco Road and the road diet stuff, and just to, as a point of clarification, I mean, I was on that committee, there's several other people on it as well. What you're saying right now is the only recommendation of moving forward is the Hoff at this point.
Correct.
That's the one we can afford right now, I think.
I was a big proponent of the, kind of the rest of the road
Yeah.
diet stuff as well, which, so conceptually, like the paint part, you're like, that shouldn't be that expensive, but apparently pulling paint off of roads is, if you can solve that problem, you become a billionaire, it's not.
It's very expensive, apparently, yeah.
And so that's some of the feedback from the meetings and council had to do with losing traffic capacity, fear of losing traffic capacity. And so the thought was if one day when we improve Adler or do another one of our, some sort of route around, that would be something we could get at that time.
I think it's still.
Well, you're,
What's that?
I
you're
think it's
talking
still
about
okay.
signals right now. At Esser Road and Blanco, some weekends the signals are just flashing, they're not red and green, they're just flashing.
Some mornings they've been doing that too.
And it sure works better without a stoplight there.
During school.
At school, yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed them flashing in the mornings.
Dangerous during school.
Some weekends they were flashing too. Boy, that sure works better than stopping everybody when there's just, 2 or 3 cars, you stop and you wait a minute or two and.
Until a high school kid pulls up there.
I do like how you use your words there about being the fear of the capacity issue, because based on the research I did, I don't think that I think it's more related to this perception of a potential problem than it is a real concur.
The other thing was cost that came up. That was the big thing that came up with council.
I mean, we tested it this weekend before that show in town, because Blanco was down to 1 lane, right there when it hit Main Street.
Yeah.
They had 1 lane shut in, so it was just fine, we heard on Saturday.
Okay, the last city project is South Esser Road bike lanes, and what the crowdsourcing activity showed was that there's times of the day where Esser Road is pretty full of pedestrians and people with strollers and bicycles and vehicles, and people are having to step off the sidewalk to get past other people. And as wide as it is, it begs the question, could we consider providing a bike lane and a vehicular lane in each direction? And I've heard from the resident city council person over there who's rather supportive of this whole notion. I don't know, what becomes of it, but that is the extent of that project, and I think it would be very useful for the people who live in that area.
So we have a schematic done that would really stripe all of that with a continuous 2-way left turn. Because the city gets lots of comments about the Rosewood intersection. So we're looking at a 2-way left turn, and with the existing curves, we can have a 2-way left turn and 1 bike lane. Or we could look at 2 bike lanes and we wouldn't have room for the 2-way left turn. So we've done schematics on both. The other issue is any of those schematics require removal of the parallel parking on the north end of Esser. And really there's whatever, 8 to 10 times Friday nights a year that becomes a big issue. And there's a lot of people that have not been happy with the thought of us losing that parallel parking. So that's something we'll have to look at a little further, where those cars might go on those Friday, Thursday nights.
It's associated with school events.
Football games, yeah.
Yeah, doing the school event, boy, they park way down Esser Road. It's a long walk. It's good fun though.
I think that as a police officer, putting up a couple cones and a couple signs, a couple nights a year could easily accommodate, this one night of the year, the bike lane and sidewalk are closed on this side.
Yeah.
I think those are easy problems to solve.
Okay. Moving on. Non-projects.
We also had some non-project recommendations. These were not discussed extensively, but this was our sense of what we heard from the committee. Recall that we had committed to have this process be data-driven. We were aware that BISD has routinely engaged a demographer who has excellent success in projecting populations, and we thought we should take advantage of that and ask AMPO to update their travel demand model to reflect the BISD demographic study data. Secondly, one of the problems we heard was that we have basically cul-de-sac developments in this county. And so what happens is people need to go out of the cul-de-sac to get on, say, Highway 46 in order to go to the next cul-de-sac development that has a school in it. And so developers by themselves won't connect those cul-de-sac developments unless there's some sort of policy that obligates them to do that. And so we wanted to encourage both the city and the county to adopt development policies that would provide for connecting developments as opposed to developing cul-de-sac developments. Third, we wanted to put this out there. I think the city has always had a major thoroughfare plan. The county has never had a major thoroughfare plan, and there's some resistance, but we felt like the sense of the committee is that it would be beneficial to both the city and the county to adopt and update and adopt a coordinated major thoroughfare plan, so we're on the same page and we could actually secure right-of-way when it was needed when developers develop lands, at least within the ETJ. And I think that if we say it often enough, pretty soon people will say, well, yeah, it's not such a bad idea.
So where does that stand now? Because I know the city's talking about hiring a new consultant for a thoroughfare plan.
So I'll go through all of these. So the report has been submitted to AMPO. I'm on the demographic committee, and actually their projections are higher than the Boerne district's projections for our area.
Maybe that's good.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Potential funding is good, yes. The cul-de-sac deal, that's something, it's actually something that's a comment on our city's comprehensive master plan as well, about interconnectivity. And truthfully, we have very good codes that require it. Just for whatever reason, the city staff hasn't been enforcing it in the past, but it's definitely something in the last year has been enforced to the rule of our code since I've been here, and so that's something we're looking at quite a bit. I'm actively trying to get rid of, there's a couple gates in town that I'm trying to get rid of that shouldn't be there, so we're working to try to get rid of those right now. So we're working on that. Major thoroughfare plan, so we have a RFQ, request for qualifications, written for our major thoroughfare plan. Waiting until the UDC finishes. So basically, the moment the UDC finishes in July, we'll have that out in the community. It has made it to several lists. We have about 8 or 9 interested consulting firms that are calling us at least monthly, kind of asking status updates for it. So we're hoping to get a good several firms submit on that RFQ. The other thing is we're scoping for that is at least going. At a minimum, today our ETJ is 1 mile. As the city grows to 25,000, our ETJ will bump from 1 mile to 2 miles. So we're definitely looking at the city's major thoroughfare out past 2 miles. That's something we maybe can look at 5 miles or something that we could do between the two of us. What we can do there.
Well, just my perception of the county, I would encourage you to stick to 2 miles. I think it's make progress where we can.
It'll be a long time before we ever will get the 5 mile range.
Don, in that regard, and we'll try not to hide behind political football, but is this a discussion among commissioners? And is there the feasibility or possibility that it'll show up in a 21-22 budget to do some sort of study or plan?
I think it's unlikely that the county would take the initiative to develop its own major thoroughfare plan. I think what's more likely is that we would want to participate in some sort of oversight of the consultant that's hired by the city of Boerne, whether we have our county engineer participate or one of the commissioners participate, and, you know, that can be a liaison, and then we would ratify that. I think would be probably the best route for success. There is
But that
some.
leaves a lot of dirt that's not being accounted for.
And fortunately, that other part, and the problem that we run into is at least one commissioner and one other member of the court, and you can figure out who I'm talking about, are very concerned about major thoroughfare plans that go across green fields, basically go across people's property, because that represents a threat to that piece of property, and I understand that. So to avoid that, I think we better not go outside that 2-mile limit. Get what we can, and as we expand, then there will be time to make those adjustments later. I do think there is support for identifying some of the roads that function as major thoroughfares. For example, Old Number 9, Waring Welfare Road, in Precinct 4, and we would identify those. But any green fields, you know, I think is going to be problematic.
Okay, thank you.
Because that's, I know the Comal County major thoroughfare plan is basically just existing roadways.
Yeah.
But it's allowed them to increase right-of-way when developments come.
Right, and straighten out some
Straighten out,
curves and things
exactly.
like that. So much of this is just, you know, getting people comfortable with it can be better, and they see it's not going to be a major culture paradigm shift.
Will that thoroughfare plan, will it be just auto-centric in its scope, or is there a way to make it multimodal in its?
The multimodal is written into it, and so that's hiking, biking, all that. I mean, we're reevaluating our street cross-sections are included in that as well. Most of our collectors and arterials already have bike sidewalks as well, but kind of looking through, should those be on the pavement, or should they be extra wide, multi-use trails? Something we're going to kind of look through, that's scope in that.
Yeah, which is a perfect segue into the final fourth recommendation, that the city and the county work together to develop a countywide cycling plan. So that's what we recommended. The city obviously has taken it to heart and taken action on that. The commissioners, not quite so much, but we did carry an item last week, Commissioners Court, to hire an engineer a consultant that would help us develop some cost estimates and, you know, get some of these applications put together and address some of these issues. So, the question before you now is this adequate? Is it deficient? Is it anything in it that's erroneous?
So when we were back in the days, it was all about low-hanging fruit, and that's part of what this project list is, right?
Yes.
So are we gonna talk about high-hanging fruit now, or are we gonna get to that?
That's why we're here. That's the rest of the work to be done.
Right.
This was, you couldn't have said it better. We were asked to get a list, well, 2 things, low-hanging fruit, things that would have general, non-controversial, like public support, so that met an obvious public need, and met some deadlines for funding application for some of the roads, and that was the spirit of which we put it in. We were not trying to short-circuit this process in the least. We were just trying to get anything out.
I have a question. To what degree, I just had a chance to read through this morning before coming here today. And what I was wondering is, we have that crowdsourced viewer tool what I think would improve the document to some degree would be to have one of the sections describing how many people supported this plan, was it, you know, because there was no real integration of that tool in the document.
I agree, we were gonna try to do that. Unfortunately, when you go look at it and you start looking at the results from the crowdsourcing, we actually engaged, those guys, I think, what was the, anyway, engaged him, can you give us a summary of the data?
Yeah.
And he gave us a summary, and it's like, you know, it really didn't support one project or the other, or some projects that supported it, which is an indication that was a controversial project more than a project that everybody supported. And so, I think collectively, I don't know if you even reviewed it, or if I just said, I don't think this is gonna be adequate, but.
Well, I looked at it enough to know I didn't like it, because it didn't do what you just said. There was a lot of work done. It's an amazingly valuable tool and exercise. We had a lot of public input. What we need now is to be able to assess what did we learn. What did people like? What did they not like? You know, let's be specific. What, if you're going to talk about a project, to your point, what kind of support did it get? We know the data's there. It hasn't been transferred into actionable knowledge. And I'm a bit stumped. If you're confused about it, because you were on the subcommittee, I am too. I think it's a big missing. And it's a future action item. We have got to solve that, because it's already collected data.
I'd be curious to look at the report before it was sent to y'all. Maybe there's some way I can summarize the data, doing a bunch of Excel magic stuff or something.
My sense of it, Jonah, was that the public input process wasn't complete. It was just sort of aborted, and, you know, before people really knew what it was and what it, before we fully engaged the community and got the whole perspective of their opinion.
You make it to the first step of getting input, but then it wasn't cleaned.
Yeah.
It wasn't cleaned up, and then we cleaned the version with public
And
input.
as you said that, I was recalling that I believe what we had talked about was having this first kind of throw mud against the wall phase, where we gathered all kinds of ideas, and then did what you all did. We combined, here's certain ones that we think match with our objectives and the public's, and then maybe had a round two to some degree. I think there's two ways to go about that. One way would be to actually do another public input period. A simpler way might be to just have a public comment period on the document that you provided. Because that was going to be my other comment or question is, how much, I mean, I know you all presented on this as city council and to the commissioner's court, but there's a very, very small 1% or less of the population that attends those and pays attention. How much public input opportunity has there been, or should we consider trying to get more before we vote to ratify this in some way?
Let me try to address that, John. The date stamp on this guy was January. So that horse is out of the barn. We made a presentation. We had a list of low-hanging fruit or publicly supported projects, and it's been used in some great degree. We have a lot of work left to do as a committee. I would ask if it makes sense to you, for all the things that you're wanting to improve it, to be just part of our future work product. That this interim report is actually, we're asking for you to ratify it, but it already happened, in a way.
Yeah.
The other thing is that additional low-hanging fruit, if I remember correctly, was designed to be really non-controversial.
Yes.
That, you know, who's gonna argue that we need to do something with Old San Antonio? Or, some of the other things mentioned, you know, near Joshua, Springs, you know, so I think that was the intent also, and all those things would improve what we have today, but it doesn't prepare us for being a county of, if we're 53,000 a day, 80 or 90,000, it doesn't prepare us for that. And let's face it, I don't know that there's any great support or appetite for some massive road building project called a loop, you know. So So what can we do in terms of improving our transportation without destroying our community? So that's the tough job that we're gonna be approaching next.
Related to the controversy question, the only project that I looked at that I thought I had a question mark in my mind was and I don't know how to pronounce that road. Hoffman Road. Was, see a lot of little homes lined up along that road, and I wasn't quite sure at the scale of the map exactly, what would happen there, and it was sort of a new project I had never heard, ever thought about in any way, and so, I just hope that, that does match that, category of, being a fairly low controversial project that.
Not for the people that live there.
That's what I would imagine.
Yeah.
Do they know about this? Do they
Yeah.
know this is in the plan? And they're-
I know that Christina's met with some of them.
Yeah, we had,
Because that's.
we had a meeting, I'm trying to remember when it was, but Commissioner Bergman had a meeting here in the chambers. We actually had every resident but one show up.
Okay.
And I remember 2 or 3 of them basically said they'd like to go back to take gravel road.
Well,
And more potholes.
Yeah.
well, it does beg the question, what is the goal of that road? Are we trying to get transportation to happen there? Is that what the goal is, to encourage transportation there, or is it to make it so it can not?
No, the reason for that is, when TxDOT's turning the frontage road on the west side to one-way, if you're on Upper Balcones Road, you can't get to 46 unless you want to turn right.
There's no way to get to
Or
There's no
Home
way to go to
Depot or
Bandera.
and-
But this
yeah.
road is there, and you can take it, and it hits 46.
Basically, means the people that live along there, I think after, if we do nothing, after a year or so, they're gonna say, my God, I can't get on my driveway, traffic's backed up here all the time.
It's gonna happen anyway,
Yeah.
even on their gravel
Yeah.
road.
Yeah.
So the other part of that is one of the developments that we're seeing submitted to the city is called Spencer Ranch, which has a portion of a major thoroughfare from our map that goes all the way to Johns and further, and they're bringing it in and teeing it right into C Road. So in theory, it's kind of starting to be a third of it to Johns Road when they get done, which will, so there'll be that many more people coming to that intersection. So if you're coming out of that development on the Highway 46, you can either make a left, or you'll be able to just go straight, go through C Road.
Well, I didn't really mean to go down the rabbit hole of one project. My main question was, for the committee, was just to have some discussion about, did we provide sufficient public input into these recommendations? If we feel like we did, and, great, but, it happened in the heat, kind of in the middle of COVID, when people were not paying attention, and the report came out, and so I just want to make sure there's opportunity there, before we are encouraged to make sure that there's opportunity there.
I think part of naively, I thought, yeah, we can fund all of this, until I was on city council, and then I realized money just doesn't fall off of trees. And so that's the scary thing to me, is that all of these projects are needed, absolutely. I think we all said that. And now I know how Mr. Kite felt a long time ago when they did this, like, yeah, we're gonna take over the world, and then all of a sudden you can fund one project. So that's the thing that scares me, is how do we fund these things? Show me the money.
I have a question about Hoffman Road. Have they factored in the Starbucks traffic into that? Because once it becomes one way, how, they're going to go to Starbucks, but if they want to go back into Boerne, they're gonna have to go down Hoffman Road as well.
You can still go to Boerne. From Starbucks, you'll be able to go back on the Package Road and go to Boerne. You will not be able to make a left to go back to the Whataburger, Home Depot, or Bandera.
You can turn right, no, they'll still let you go from where Upper Balcones hits. You can still go straight ahead to
There's like an
46,
outside.
only to turn right, no.
And it'll be the same way for School Street. Got to make sure everyone remembers that School Street, if you come down School Street, you'll be able to make a right onto 46 to go to Home Depot, but you will not be able to make a left now to come back towards HEB.
No, are you, at least the schematic I have, when you come down School Street going south, you'll be able to make a right turn and get on the entrance ramp and go on. But there's still a straight ahead that you can go to 46.
They're basically keeping What's there today is that will be a backage road, just like it on the other side.
Yeah, I need to go
But
back.
it'll go back to 46, but there'll be a median, there, so you won't be able to make a left.
I'll have to go back and look and see, I've got all that stuff.
Okay, so
But-
it's the
but-
same scenarios on both sides.
But what we're really looking at here is, I mean, we've talked about this, for the last 10 years, I've been on different committees, we've talked about this. Okay, the town keeps growing and growing and growing, and like TxDOT now is making the frontage road one way. Okay, that means you're gonna shift a lot of that traffic over to Old San Antonio Road. We've talked about it for years. You know, when are we gonna do something? It's gonna be so bad that, and I've experienced this for many years, we wait until it gets so bad, then you try to do construction under heavy traffic, when you could have done it planning ahead, and you could have been relatively light traffic. I mean, you know, when we did all this elevated stuff in San Antonio, that was a nightmare for me to figure out, how are we gonna do this under traffic? Well, here we are, we're sitting here today, talking about things that we know is gonna happen. We also know, in the foreseeable future, we don't have any money for that.
So just a little portion of Cascade Caverns that we submitted to MPO, it was just a small portion of the project, was $9.5 million. So yeah, so you take in the whole rest of the Old San Antonio Road and everything else like that.
Well, see, if we'd have done it, you know, I'll give you an example. The first four-level interchange I did was at 10 and 37 in southeast San Antonio. Cost $13 million. The interchange I did at 410 and 10 on the north side, $130 million. You know, no longer do we have 19-cent asphalt or 9 cents reinforcing steel. We're stuck with this now, but the longer we wait, the more it's gonna cost, and the more impact is, just like what's sitting here at 46 and 10. That's atrocious. I don't understand what TxDOT is doing there.
Well, John, you're expressing the frustrations of everybody in the room. We can't change that. We come up with whatever 8 prospects, which is the low-hanging fruit, the less controversial. What's the total cost of that stuff? 60, 70 million? Do we know?
We don't know, but I think, you know, I've given some thought to this, and we were told by the steering committee that we shouldn't worry about cost for low-hanging fruit, just say what makes sense. And that may be good for low-hanging fruit, but for us to make legitimate decisions and recommendations, I think we need to understand the cost. Because we can't make pie-in-the-sky recommendations that have no chance of succeeding. And the context in which we move forward, I mean, I'm gonna just say my opinion here, it's not the committee's opinion, but we have got to engage TxDOT if we have any kind of meaningful chance to fund any of these. Now, we may not like everything they do, or how they do it, and what they do, but they're the ones with the money, and we've gotta figure out a way to get them to play nice with
They
us.
are the ones with the money, and it's not like they haven't dumped money into this
Right.
community in the last decade.
Right.
It's probably close to 80 or 100 million that they've spent here. So whether it's AMPO or TxDOT or whatever, some local money, I mean, let's put things in perspective here. Our school district in the last decade has had 2 bonds for a total of $274 million. We've built like 5 or 6 schools with that money, renovated a bunch more. That is a lot of money to be spent. We have a tax rate to pay for it that's been stable, and it will be stable probably for the next 5 years. So really what it comes down to is if the county and the city are really serious about doing something multimodal, to your point, it's gonna cost money. So what are you gonna do? You know, this stuff doesn't come for free. So if you can grab X from TxDOT, X from AMPO, then the local citizen is gonna have to pick up the rest.
When's the last time we had a bond for transportation?
Herf Road was the last county bond issue.
That was 2013.
No, it was sooner than that. It was, what, John? 2007?
It's not that long ago.
That was the last one for the major transportation project.
But, you know, while we're thinking about this, like we've talked about, Old St. Johnny Road, it can be done in stages that cuts the cost. But, yeah, I would, Rich, you're right, it's probably gonna be bond. And with TxDOT, if you can provide money, the more money you can provide your share,
You're better off paying it.
I mean, when I was there, that's what I did.
Let's be very
And if
frank.
you brought it to me, I would
We can
put it
argue
up.
this till the cows come home,
Huh?
right? The bottom line is, if you look at the last 30 years of this community, as we've gone from 13,000 people in 1990 to 23,000 in 2000, to 34,000 in 2010, to 53,000 in 2020. We built one road, or we widened one road, okay? We have not, as a community, planned for the future transportation-wise. The only governmental entity, I'm sorry, that has done that is the school district, because we have no choice. You go from 3,000 kids to 10,000 kids, they don't fit in the same old schools. You gotta do something about it. And so, and there's a price to pay with that, it's called taxes. So you better shave your taxes over here, so you can spend your taxes over there. But, you know, we shouldn't be, we have to know costs.
Yes.
It's crazy not to know costs. So it's known, and I suspect what we'll also find is rather than go down the road of some gateway, which would have been $300 or $400 million, if you talk about 3-lane roads that are closer into the city with some walking trails and bike trails along it, it's gonna be a hell of a lot less money and a lot less invasive on people's property. So I think there's a win-win there for everybody if we just look at a map and figure out what the best area, the best way to go is.
Well, to focus on maximizing efficiency, especially with current infrastructure, is really, that's one of my views on the whole roundabout thing and the whole roundabout network, if you will, to bypass. It's about efficiency, not just about throwing more money and hoping it gets better, because it doesn't.
So I guess, well, are you saying that like if you do a roundabout at North Main near a school, it's not a costly item, but it does improve the flow and the efficiency?
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
It
Yeah,
can nearly
that's right.
double the processing of an intersection
Right.
in certain circumstances.
So you, yeah.
Well, you gotta get user cost into this, and user cost will blow your mind. If you can efficiently go somewhere, that's one thing, but if you've gotta wait in traffic and do this and do that, it's costing the public, whether you like it or not. So you might as well do something, you know, have a bond issue or whatever, but it's costing you for not having the proper mobility in your community.
I'll say one other thing, if you have a bond issue, not that we want to be like Washington DC, but you better have enough sweeteners in there for the different parts of the county. Because when we had a vote on Herf Road, it was way, way ahead, and then Comfort came in, and they voted against it 4-1. Why do they care about this? Well, you know, if you're gonna have a bond, you better put something up there for Comfort, so they want to vote for it too.
And that really kind of, you know, the low-hanging fruit, again, was intended to be no-brainers, and people said, yeah, that makes sense. Because if you can recall back at the end of the Kendall Gateway, I don't think the city or the county had very good public credibility. And were we to come up with the best transportation plan, there's no way we could have sold it or a bond issue. And so if we can implement a few common sense projects that the public says, yeah, okay, now you guys got it, then I think we're ready to go to the higher hanging fruit and make recommendations that I believe will be able to convince the public this is in their best interest to support with their partner.
Now, to your point, and also Rich's, that there's really two numbers involved here. Not knowing what those budget numbers are, it's not only what the cost of the project is, but if there's participation by TxDOT, or we're trying to bring TxDOT, is what is the local match dollars, and that possibly could be sold to the public a lot better, even within the aspect of a referendum. If we're asking you for $1, and we're gonna get a $10 project out of it, in that regard. So I do think it behooves us to know what those numbers are, at least if we can fit it in the ballpark. We talked about 2 different roundabouts. I know that our intent, damn comfort for coming in on the issue, but that we're hoping that TxDOT will pay for it, and that there'll be a small county match. I'm not sure how that looks like at the Adler School Road, and whether Main Street is part of that TxDOT infrastructure or not, and where that all fits in. But I would think that those percentages need to be factored in.
So, we kind of veered off of the path, I'm sorry that happened. We need to decide whether we want to do anything regarding the interim report, or are we just going to ignore it? I think it would help to say it's okay, it's not complete, and we can come up with additional low-hanging fruit if you believe that it's necessary. But somehow or another, I want to get a committee position relevant to the report.
Well, I would think we've pretty much agreed on this report. I think the next step would be, let's figure out, what are we talking about in cost?
For what's in the report?
For what's in this report. In other words, don't be pulling in a bunch of other stuff, but, you know, we're saying, this is what we need. Well, what's it gonna cost?
So I'm a little confused, to be honest with you. I mean, I know it was on the ad hoc committee. We never really had a Zoom meeting or anything to really discuss the ideas. So, you know, some of the ones like on I-10, out around, say, welfare, wearing, you know, I don't begrudge that people have needs there. I just, from a standpoint of the density and people served, I'm skeptical that that's the most efficient use of whatever funds we might be able to get. And so when I look at the report, I sit there and I go, well, why are we doing this when I don't see a congestion problem there. Hell, I was over there the other day, had no problem navigating it. It's a little weird, but big deal. I get around. So I was over in Waring. So anyway, I guess I do find myself a little skeptical that would make the cut if it was put to a big open forum discussion.
Have you been there during an ag show?
It's one time a year.
It's way different.
It's one time a year.
It's not just one time a year that it's used. It's used very often. Yeah.
What street?
At Joshua Springs, where the,
Oh, yeah.
I'm still skeptical when I come out of, say, the center and it's rush hour around, you know, school exiting and that back up at, say, Herf Road, relative to the ag show. That's one is commuting, the other one is going to a opt-in weekend experience.
it's also a bigger picture thing. So when we're talking about county and city together and passing a bond, that's a big picture deal.
Well, fair enough. I'm just skeptical that you sit there and you go, cost benefit analysis, do the benefits warrant the cost versus other potential?
Versus like adding a double turn lane at Herf and Adler, or Herf and River Road, something. Like, to me, that's like one of the biggest pressing points in the town. And I wasn't part of the discussions as to which projects were selected, but that would be one
I'm sorry to play devil's advocate. I know it'd be crazy to just be like, let's move on, but I'm also sitting there going, well, and also if I'm AMPO, am I gonna go, yeah, that seems important to me, there's a stock show there, you know, gotta do that? Or am I gonna go, wait a minute, I got this huge city, and I got equity issues, and I got lots of density and lots of people having, you know, trying to get through, and to John's point, I've got people that time is money. Are those things that are even gonna rise? Or are we trying to let our cream be obvious and the rest of them they're just gonna ignore? I mean,
They'll tell you right off the bat. They did that to us.
yeah,
It wasn't what we expected either.
So I guess my point is that I'm just really skeptical that the cost benefit analysis has been done in that regard.
It hasn't, because obviously we're missing the cost.
Well, there's that too.
You said a key word there too, so in the AMPO submittal that we just made, equity is a very important term right now. There's a big part of the submittal is how is this equitable transportation? So that's definitely something, if you're looking for federal funding right now, that's definitely something we need to be thinking.
I would be concerned that having, like you said, that, you know, the Waring welfare area is problematic. However, we've just seen Lily Ranch, which is gonna be, what, Fredericksburg?
Old Fredericksburg.
Road. That will become an issue.
But it's an issue already.
Yeah, it's an issue now, and it's a big path, basically, and we're gonna put a big development on it. So I would see that becoming kind of like Hoffman Road, it's like, oh my, it's a big problem. So I wonder if that one would need to be, as well, like that, and on the problem.
Yeah, but the problem you get there is, if you start doing that for this developer that wants to come in there, then you're taking all of our tax money and subsidizing his development.
I do not agree with using tax dollars
Right there.
to fix the things they broke. However, we can't ignore it.
Because you're gonna get hit with people saying, well, if you do this, you're just encouraging people to come in and develop, you know, so.
Yes, I mean, that's somewhat of the thinking that I've had related to the Scenic Loop Road problem as well. The problem is there's a bunch of other people who live on Scenic Loop Road. It's not their fault that a developer came in there and now they're, but I had that same, when I was reading about that, just like, it gives me heartburn a little bit, thinking like, okay, you know, we're gonna go match the dollars out of our taxes to help pay for this new community that's coming to our town, stressing out our schools and all of our infrastructure, but, yeah.
Isn't there a development agreement between Backy and the city that they have to widen the road, or is that just from Corley to Valerie?
It's only for the part that's in front of the backing development.
So, okay, so just part that's in front of their development, meanwhile, they're gonna have 1,000 homes, they're gonna be feeding traffic from the end of their development, Valerie Lane, all the way to 10, and then going the other way too.
Yeah.
Which, because if the road that goes underneath the freeway, where Alamo Community, if that road ever gets completed to Boerne Stage, which it will, then Boerne Stage from Corley Road to the county line will be a very well-traveled road. And AMPO's gotta look at that too, because that will be a future big traffic area. And we will build a school over there on that side of the freeway.
I would tell you that, I don't know, maybe you studied it, but I don't believe, maybe 2 lanes in each direction and 1 center left turn lane might be adequate for the ultimate section there, but it wouldn't surprise me that you'd need 3 in each direction.
I haven't studied it, but I'll look at that. And the other part about that development too is they're building a big east-west connector from Scenic Loop to west, at dead into that property that will one day take that over, to the next development, Upper Balcones.
The next development.
So it'll connect Upper Balcones and Scenic Loop, which will be great.
Well, I know the city development department always, Bernie, city development, planning, zoning, whatever, always said that that part of this, the area west of Interstate 10 and south of Upper Balcones is ripe for development because it's flat. You know, you go north of Upper Balcones, it's hillier, you won't have the density of housing, but it wouldn't surprise me within 20 years, 15, 20 years, the population south of Upper Balcones, west of Interstate 10, down to Scenic Loop will almost match what we have today in the city of Boerne. This would be a West Boerne. And I think that's gonna happen.
That's what we're like making in East Boerne too. And
Right.
Can we talk about the cost part of it though? If we're gonna get down to that stuff with the projects, and Jeff, you could comment to this, like how do you figure out, when you did that for AMPO, do we have to hire, does it cost us something to figure that out?
We hired a consultant.
Yeah,
Yeah, you are.
so how much is the cost for that, for projects, you know? Cause there's another layer here that we have to figure out too, when we think about each project. Would that each one require a consultant?
You could have one consultant come in and look at all of them, or you could do that between a bunch of consultants.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're talking about, really high level of detail. I think we're talking range of magnitude.
Yeah, order of magnitude
Right.
type concept, yeah.
And it wouldn't be ridiculous numbers like we're talking about for the projects themselves, right? Is it possible for us to find that money?
Well, I mean, we've got some money in the county budget, and
Right.
that's why we're gonna hire somebody to help with some of these things.
Yeah.
I think, the city sounds like y'all are already well on the way,
I'm trying to think of the 4 projects.
but you'd have to update Old San Antonio Road.
Mhm.
That's
At Old San Antonio, we already have the bridge, Main Creek Bridge cost, we already have that built into the homeowner utility.
We've already talked about the roundabout.
Roundabout, we definitely will have a cost there.
So then you got the Hawk, which has been studied.
We've already-
until-
We already have the price for that,
And then some,
and then Esser, we're just gonna do that ourselves internally, so. Yeah, we have the city stuff kind of pretty close.
Figured out.
Which roundabout are you talking about?
The one at Adler and School Street, Main Street,
But that could be designed to not take that service station.
that's what we thought.
That's not what that's not what the city's consultant on text.
Well, I mean, I saw one of your consultants wipe the whole service station and everything else out. You know, they're not thinking about cost, they're thinking about how much money they could make off. I mean, you know, I'll be honest with you.
So Don, are you looking for a ratification of these 4 projects, or are you looking for a continued discussion? And does a continued discussion require us knowing some numbers
well,
before
I
we give a thumbs up on it?
what I'm doing is thinking, okay, so we get the cost, okay, we bring the cost back here, say, okay, well, this costs this much, this costs this much, you know, okay, now are you ready to ratify this or not? Or do you want to strike the project, or, you know?
You know, on these 8 projects, we had discussions ad nauseum before COVID. I know that the planning committee had looked at them closely. They were older projects that we had looked at in previous studies. And so when the ad hoc committee met, I felt comfortable on those particular recommendations to hand them off to the political authorities that needed to move forward, that we were saying in good faith that these are important projects to the community, and with the exception of the Hoffman Road project, that after all the discussion and contemplation from another life in the 2019, early 2020, that they were viable projects. I'm not sure what we're gonna beat up on anymore, because it is a political entity that'll have to look at the cost effectiveness and whether they wanna move forward on them. They may put them in the trash bin and say, it's too costly for us, or TxDOT doesn't wanna play, or, you know, neighborhoods are moving to a different place. So I'm not sure why we need to continue discussing those. If we wanna bring Hoffman up as the impact on those residents and how that looks different, then I don't have a problem with that. But certainly, out of my own curiosity and for the particular projects that I'm concerned with, I'd like to know what the costs are, but I don't think it has changed my mind about whether they're important projects or not.
That's true.
I think what I personally would like to see in some capacity is, a way to be accountable to the public and say, here's why we chose these over these other ones. That were all, that, you know, all these people proposed all these ideas, and here's the ones we chose, and just make sure that we are in the spirit of, you know, living up to the spirit of transparency. We're showing our work, here's why those are the 8 projects that we came up with. We did all this research, and these are the 8 most important low-hanging fruit projects that we can come up with. And I think it's a little bit challenging, because some members of this committee were also part of a subcommittee where they spent a ton of time working on that and talking about it, and other members were not. And so for those who were not, and in fact, towards the end, I think I started going to them, and North we started going more frequently to the projects committee group to be more involved there. But to me, I feel a little bit uncomfortable right now, just with some uncertainty about how much public input or transparency we're having related to why we chose these projects, or the methodology we used, and how we incorporated input from the public.
I think there was enough public involvement at that time on this. I think what we need to do is what we have, I think, is good. Now, some of these projects, we need to fine tune them, like that frontage road to Allen Road. There's no way you're gonna afford to build a frontage road through that mountainous cut. When really your problem is the turning problem down. Take care of that at a whole lot lesser cost. There's other projects, like I'm saying, the turnaround at Adler and that. We need to look at other ideas rather than wiping out service station, all the better ideas there. But, and there's some other projects that we need to fine tune them a little bit. So I think maybe accept this as we have it, with the idea of going in and looking at each one of these more critically and fine tune them, and then let's get the cost estimate and present that to the public. And like, for instance, on Old San Antonio Road, I don't know that you necessarily need to build a 5-lane with bike lanes on it to start with. What we need is at least 3 lanes, but line it right away so you're ready to go when funding, additional funding comes available. Things like this, and get it down to where the cost you can present to the public, and they understand that, hey, you're trying to do something, but not Cadillac necessarily. And if the more money we can have available for costs matching with TxDOT, the more they're gonna give you.
Just a question for the two of you. Were we asked to ratify the income report, or is this just kind of a working, living, breathing document that we can go forward with it as is? Just call it COVID, and just, this is what we had to do
Well,
at the time.
and,
That's how I view it.
yeah, I mean, I have a hard time saying, oh, we want to withdraw one of the projects because it was the best we could do under the circumstances. It's been represented as this is an ad hoc interim, best shot at it, absent adequate public comment. It's just like, we haven't misled anybody about how we got to it. We said, what do you think? Well, it sounds good to me, I guess. What do you think? We don't know how much it costs. That's the best we could do at the time. And I think that what I'm hearing is that there's a desire to have a complete look at all of the low-hanging fruit projects that come back with some cost. We maybe don't need to dwell on that so much because we're past the time frame, and we've got some momentum on that. What we need to do now is kind of move forward on all the projects, low-hanging fruit projects and big visionary projects, kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, and then we need to underpin that with good solid data and good solid cost, and then do a cost-benefit analysis and integrate that with policy. So, maybe ratification of this report just becomes moot, and it is what it is.
I mean, it happened. It's
I was
already.
gonna say.
Last year.
I don't know how we're gonna change
It's
this.
already kind of ratified.
What I'm struggling with is where it becomes our responsibility to get from point A to point B and say, this is a project that's gonna cost this much, this is how much right of way we need, and all that other stuff. We've given an arching overview of these are important projects for this community as this committee sees them. And as the city has done, they've moved forward on those recommendations. And there's obviously gonna be a conversation that says, well, you suggested this roundabout, but our consultants say we have to wipe out the service station and 2 restaurants and half a school, and it doesn't work, we're not gonna take it on. But at the same time, I think the public entity needs to take ownership in it and move forward. And if they just say that this doesn't work for us or doesn't work for our budget, then at least we know. But at the same time, we need to be looking at the other projects down the road.
Gary, I completely
I mean,
agree with everything you're saying.
I don't want to enter into paralysis by analysis. I don't want to sit here for another year, whether I have a pandemic over my head or not, and still be right where we are in 2022.
Just remember our charge from the mayors and the county judge. We're not, if we deal with cost, they're supposed to be rather broad brush, just per square foot, cost estimates, just order of magnitude sort of thing. We were never supposed, it wasn't that we're not supposed to care about budgets, we're not supposed to spend a bunch of time drilling down, getting it right, because we're not the engineers, we're not doing road cross sections, we're not doing demographic studies that are definitive, that are decision makers. We are the voice of the citizenry, but not being stupid about it, nor being hidden. And I think we didn't dream up these 8 projects in a vacuum, not caring about the work of this committee. We did because we were asked, because there were deadlines looming, because the funding authorities for our work needed to hear from us, even though COVID was there. So we set up the subcommittee and said, here is an example, here are the best projects we have at the top of our mind. It, by no stretch does it mean we're through with low-hanging fruit. The mayor's been absolutely clear, the mayor of Boerne, saying he wants a lot of recommendations from us. And part of the downside of meeting in a city hall, when you got a city councilman, county commissioner, and city staff, is the temptation is let's filter our recommendations through the filter of what is practical, what will be approved, what is going to play well politically. That's not our job. It's quite okay if city council, yes, says these projects are to be ignored, and they put them in the trash can. We've done our job. We did what we were asked. To not put voice to projects that we think are worth consideration is not doing our job. So this analysis by paralysis, I think, is pretty spot on for me, but the crowdsourcing information is the voice of the people. We need to be able to understand that stuff. And we can't right now, and that's really frustrating.
Well, somebody mentioned earlier that it was an incomplete process. You got all this feedback, all these ideas, and invariably the next step is you cull all these ideas down to a more manageable number, and then you go back out to the people and say, okay, we've taken these 38 different ideas, we've gotten it down to 8, weigh in again on these 8, and that's really when you're going to develop more of a consensus, I would hope.
I'm going to push back a little, Rich. That implies that there's 30 of those ideas that were not. And when I heard him ask us for a lot of recommendations, I'm not sure 30 of those 38 should not make it on the list in some shape, form, or fashion to be rejected by staff as impractical, unaffordable, not really representing, not equitable. But certainly to prioritize the 8, to your point, I think this is exactly where we want to go. So consider the possibility of let's continue to build on a list of low-hanging fruit while we deal with the high-hanging fruit. And we've got to drive towards some deliverables, guys. We can't talk this to death forever.
And Bob, I'd like to add to what you were just saying. I think for the purposes that document was created, it was spot on. Like, I want to make sure that my critique of it is not related to that. My critique of it is if we are to take that document and try to make it the official document for now or something. But I think at the time, given the circumstances you were under, in the middle of COVID, I think it was perfectly justified. The way it went out was great. I don't have any criticisms there. I think taking that and applying it, and like us all voting on it, and me voting to support it, and then some landowner or some people coming and yelling at me or getting upset, like, why did you vote for that? And I'm like, I don't know, I just kind of read a little bit about it, and I feel like I want to understand it a little bit better. I want to have more public input on the process before I personally would stand up and say, yes, this is the official final version of the report that we're sending out or something.
Where's it go? Do we have to ratify it? It's done, it's out there, let's just let it ride and just be happy with it. I mean,
I'm good with that.
yeah. COVID.
Constant
COVID.
We're going to call that COVID consensus.
We can also blame that we were taking action during the freeze.
Yeah.
So we can blame the freeze on that.
All right, thank you all for that. It really was helpful, I think, and some interesting, good discussion took place. I don't know that I want to get into a detailed review of where we were, but I do want to remind us that we're here to develop a countywide transportation plan to mitigate current and future traffic congestion in a way preserves cultural and environmental resources and promotes appropriate economic development. We need deliverables that include a short-range program of projects and operational improvements that can be implemented in the short run. We need a long-range program of transportation improvements that addresses current and projected travel demand, and a program, thirdly, a program with recommended policies to guide the planning and design of the transportation system. That's what our charge is. I think we still need to do those three things. We've taken some step towards that first one with the interim report, but it's by no means the foundation, it's just sort of an interim step. So I know that we've got a wonderful resource in terms of the crowdsourcing and the website, and we've got a committee structure, and I would like for y'all to talk about, do we want to maintain that committee structure? Do we need to reconstitute that? I know there was, my sense was there was some evolution going on in the committees, and some of them got combined, and some of them kind
You
of.
talking about the subcommittee?
Subcommittees.
One subcommittee calls, three of them up, the
Yeah.
projects review.
You know, I think that the way that the project subcommittee evolved in the previous session, ended up turning into like one committee where so much of the action was happening. I mean, I'm okay with that, but it seems like, in my initial vision, that was like, wow, I thought that was what the whole committee would be kind of getting into. Maybe it wasn't practical for the whole committee. But there was certainly one committee where a lot of action was happening, and a couple others that seemed to be sort of doing a little bit here and there, but I don't know if that's bad or good. I would want to be part of that committee, I guess, if that's how we're doing it again.
We were only meeting one, were we meeting twice a month?
We were before as a big committee, but there were subcommittee meetings going on in between.
Yeah, I would think, you know, if committees even are we gonna have the same number of people as we did before? 18, okay. That's not that large a group to, really, it's a manageable sized group to have a robust discussion on projects. You know, you have more diversity when you've got a larger group of people, and you'll have different thoughts weighing in as to whether this idea or that idea is practical or not. So if we're moving in a direction of really major stuff, I really think the whole committee ought to be able to weigh in on that.
One of the things I've discussed with Bob is that it's my hope that our ultimate recommendations will be more than simply a list of projects to do. And when I talked to Bob about it, I noticed his eyes shined when I said something a certain way. It would be, if we could come up with something that describes the transportation system in Kendall County in a way that lay people can understand it. And maybe it's something like, we don't recommend any additional interstate class facilities in Kendall County. That we recommend a system of connected urban arterials to move traffic around and through the county. And if we can do something like that, then I think we can start making some progress in engaging TxDOT to fund that. And I don't know if y'all are interested in that kind of approach, but I think that if we can get that out of the way early on, then it sort of sets the table for how we move forward on the specific projects.
Yeah, why my eyes lit up is I found that to be a way to rather eloquently, and we need to make it brief, fairly brief, so it is understandable, to combine the need for automobile-centric solutions with multimodal, non-automobile mobility solutions, and just say this committee as a group feels like this is worth being the basis that we move forward, regardless of where the technology goes in the next 5 years. It's still something we think the community wants and supports this general approach to this topic. And now here's a list of projects that we think now are good ones to think about.
You know, the subtle terminology is, I've never liked the word transportation, I like the word mobility, for one. Now, that does lead us down a path that I've been at once before, where mobility sounds like mass transportation and public transportation, and then you get doomed on that end at that point. But I do think we should send out a message that we're talking more, we're not talking only roadways and asphalt and concrete. We're talking about moving people around the community, within the community efficiently. And whether that can be said simply or not is a different matter.
So it's really funny to me because the stuff I've been reading, and certainly even seeing reflected in federal discussions, is that, you know, we've had this paradigm of how you build a city out or a region out, and people are finding that, first of all, it's super expensive to maintain, super expensive to expand upon because now the materials are more expensive. Hasn't necessarily solved congestion, as we've seen in multiple demonstrations. And so, you know, part of what I find this whole committee fascinating, and actually love the players on it and the great knowledge that we have, is that my view is, you know, or question is, how do we break that DNA? How do we make the DNA that transcends those tendencies? You know, because it hasn't been solved yet. You know, this traffic problem has not been solved anywhere, and maybe it's not solvable. I don't know. But I guess where I would come back to that is also it's mobility, which I define more broadly. It's a holistic view, which is why I agree with you on that. But then also I start to think about, you know, it's about efficiency, and it's not just efficiency in terms of like how many cars you can process. It's also about the cost efficiency and what you essentially incentivize by throwing tax dollars at traffic, at mobility. What are you actually incentivizing? Because all of it is incentivized. People say, oh, you know, public transportation is too expensive, you gotta incentivize it. Well, every road that's built is an incentivized piece of the system. So what is the most efficient way to create an infrastructure for mobility in Kendall County? That's the big question in my opinion.
And obviously it links into the development plans, because it has to incorporate the schools, where the schools are being built, where the neighborhoods are being built, where the chicken lays the egg, and where the egg hatches, and where the chicken is off.
County strategic plan type stuff.
Oh, you right?
Yeah.
You know, I also think there's been some really fascinating lessons to be learned from the whole COVID experience. I mean, I don't know if y'all remember, but right when they did I'm sure everyone remembers, right when they did the first initial shutdown, when you could drive around Boerne, it was like a ghost town, nobody was out of their house. I mean, all these packed roads were empty, and I have worked from home for a year since then. And my work bought me a desk in my house with monitors, and I have the video thing, and I do video conferences all day long. And I had this idea one time, and it might be crazy, but maybe it's not. Probably is, given that it was one of my ideas, but was how much does it cost for a person to be using the roads every day, driving to work and back for a year? And if that person is taken off the roads and they're no longer using, filling up space in the traffic and no longer doing that, is there a tangible benefit financially to the county and to the citizens for having that person not using the road? And is it possible to somehow incentivize companies to do remote working arrangements where their employees are no longer driving down San Antonio every single day, but now they're working from home and things like that? It's kind of, I think there actually might be opportunity there to get a lot of people off the roads, because working from home is becoming like the whole new, like everybody's doing it now. And it's becoming, they're realizing workers are more productive, and there's a whole bunch of benefits to it, so.
You're right, John.
Not that we're gonna solve that problem in this
No.
committee, but,
You're right, I mean, people do see that. I've been working out of my house for 15 years, and I love it. But the reality is, as our population grows in our community, even if you've got 60% of those people working at home, you're still gonna have people going from their house to drop their kids off at school, or pick up the drive, go to the dry cleaner or an HEB. So you're gonna have, I mean, you're still gonna have a demand. The question is, as the density increases in the city of Boerne, which it will, and you see Kendall County go from 53,000 people to maybe 90, and I don't know what the 20, 30-year forecast is, but let's say it's the 90. We have 300, gosh, I don't know, 400 square miles in Kendall County. Even at 90,000 people, that's still fairly rural in nature. You know, how do we develop a thoroughfare plan that meets the needs of a 90,000 person county? Because it's still gonna be fairly rural, you know, in the northern parts. You'll have your 800-acre ranches that'll sell and they'll build 90 or 100 houses, but that's not gonna be huge.
I think, just though, what was surprising about transportation for me is how astronomical the costs are. $9 million gets you a parking lot, basically. I mean, you get this tiny little intersection made, threw millions of dollars at it, and from a cost-benefit analysis, if a community was like, you know what, let's spend $9 million on actually incentivizing these companies to do something where you took a whole bunch of cars off the road, I don't know. I mean, obviously, this is far out stuff. I know it's probably not something that we're gonna ever do, but
Yeah, there you go.
what's that?
Well, I don't know, we need drones, we need little fly places.
Yeah.
That's not annoying.
Mr. Sharma, you look like you wanted to say something. You said you're taking all this in and.
Yeah, I'll just keep my mouth shut, it's just, I wasn't a part of this before, so, no, it's just interesting that, you know, you say the $9 million Cascade Caverns, and I've been working with TxDOT for 25 years, but, yeah, during the peak hour, you might not see improvement, but the other 22 hours of the day, the people that live there will be able to get in and out and go to HEB and stuff, and you gotta remember that part of it. And there is a cost associated with the road user cost, like I think you mentioned earlier, the TxDOT puts out a road user cost every year, and it's, right now it's $34 for a passenger vehicle, it's 40-something for a truck, so.
Can you explain that a little bit? Like, what do you
Road
mean,
user
$34 per day? Or
Per hour.
Per hour, so
Per
cars
hour,
on the
per
road,
vehicle.
$34 an hour.
Yeah, that's, it's out there, and you could Google road user costs, TxDOT, and there's a document they put out every year for that, so. Yeah, I don't know, I think yeah, I guess it's cool to see the big picture, but I guess you gotta kind of remember where we're at.
No.
It's like, I like the low-hanging fruit thing, I think that's kind of smart. Yeah, interesting discussion.
So we are 13 minutes away from our preordained conclusion, and I have a sense that we're not going to come to any
Does it
additional.
make sense to prioritize taking the public feedback map though and distilling it down to something that's, you know what I mean, just firmer, you know,
Well,
squiggly lines?
Yeah, and I think that's important. What I'd like y'all to do for your homework for the next meeting is to, we've talked about where we were, think about that some more, where you remember we were, and then let's carry items 5 and 6 as a main topic for next meeting.
But I do want to follow up on what Tim just said. I absolutely think that's job one, but we have a subcommittee called GIS that I think should drive it for us. If they need money, if they need resources, if you need anything, we need to know that, and let's get that done. But we can't do everything at the full committee level. And I still look to you guys on GIS to be the subject matter experts.
So is Marcus off the committee? Was that?
No, he had a conflict today.
Okay, good. Okay, so he's still around.
He is.
Okay. I wonder if that's I mean, yes, it's a GIS committee, but it's actually in a way, it may just be a subcommittee that looks at the GIS. Like,
Well, all right,
it's an
slash
actually
public
tech
outreach,
guys,
you know, Northern, the public outreach. Between the two of them, that's where this topic resides, right? I mean, it's public outreach and it's the data we got.
And AMPO might be able to provide data instead of just a map. I wonder if they can make a report. Yeah, we can ask if they can make a report,
Well,
We've tried and it's indecipherable.
or we can do it then.
Yeah, we'll have to be able to do it. The problem is
Want to?
that my time is highly restricted right now.
Yeah.
I'm juggling 2 jobs.
No, I didn't mean to say it was your job to do it. It's as a subcommittee, your job, my request, by definition, GIS is tell us what needs to happen to get from point A to point B. And if we gotta go consultant or outsiders, or whatever we gotta do, ask for money from the city, let's do it, because I agree with Ben completely. We got all this data, let's turn it into knowledge.
And it's not complicated,
If you can just
it's
see it
just
as
kind of
dots,
hard.
yes.
It really is not, you just have to, sometimes there's a bunch of squiggly lines, determine what the individual projects are, and then read through the comments, were they for or against it, basically, and tally it up.
About the crap.
And-
Okay, well, that's good.
Okay,
Listen,
hotspots.
before we get off this topic, I wanna offer opinion on two more of these subcommittees. I hope everybody agrees with me. I think the subject matter expert committee was invaluable. I think it needs to stay alive and vibrant.
We will.
We're not through learning, and if
I'll-
I quit this thing tomorrow, I would always remember the roundabout presentation from Carmel, Indiana.
I'll circle up with Tim Banwolf on that, and I mean, we brought people in from out of town. I don't think it needs to be done that way from a cost benefit, cost standpoint.
No, don't worry about it. It was great. I'm
But let's
glad
bring
he
in
went
some
to-
other ideas that are,
Kim only had a conflict today. He tried to get out of a Zoom meeting, he couldn't do it.
right.
My last comment had to do with the subcommittee. I asked to be established, and I question whether it's gonna ever have life. But with a new EDC member, and if Kim resurfaces, maybe we can talk about it. It's called Appropriate Economic Development. If you heard Don reiterate our mission, the last phrase in that was, we're gonna protect the environment, blah, 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 and support appropriate economic development. And from the past definitions of what this whole broad topic would be about, it's real easy to get yourself in a frame of mind of, we're gonna build a bunch of roads to promote commercial enterprises to make traffic better and make people rich. Not necessarily. So, and what I talked to Kim about, the reason I thought about this, is I had a chance a few years ago to go to a little town of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, on a weekend, and it's a tourist town, and it's an art magnet. But what they have done at the Chamber of Commerce level or EDC level was to say, okay, how can we do this? Because their roads were getting choked. It's a little windy town. And they decided, it's almost to get into mass transit, but they created some parking lots, not right in the heart of the, well, some parking lots here and there with a trolley with designated red route, blue route, green route. They took off different directions on a pretty religious schedule to move pedestrians from one little area to another, and it really promoted commercial activity without paving paradise. It struck me as something, a curiosity in my mind, would the Boerne merchant community support the notion of either that kind of a trolley or anything else? It just helps define what is appropriate economic development. I'm getting passionate saying it, it went over like a lead balloon. It's not ever had life in that part of it.
Where was that, Bob, that you were just talking about?
Eureka Springs, Arkansas. There's many towns that have those, it's just the one I was in. It just struck me as something really effective.
I was in Cape Cod last fall, or two Octobers ago. Same thing. They built a downtown out of what had been a field. And there was and they built it with architecture that looked like the 1890s. And New England-y, type, and Main Street was packed with shops. There was tons of parking behind it. And you could walk from one end of downtown to the other in 3 minutes. And it was really fascinating.
Mhm.
So we have a very long Main Street that's spread like that because that's how it was built. It's not the most efficient way. And even in Fredericksburg, to go from the museum, the Nimitz Museum, to the other end of, is like 1.5 miles. It's quite a long ways. So you've got to get in your car and keep driving and keep driving, so.
Well, the piece about the trolley model that we've discussed before that was different here is the idea of kind of external parking areas. I think that is something that I just hadn't quite ever just thought about. I think that really changes the potential viability of it. I think that really could work, maybe.
And
Maybe
we
worth
have,
thinking about more.
we have the trolley type, we have it classified as far as the maps are concerned, under pedestrian, bike, transit kind of thing. And it kind of sounds like it would fit both mobility.
Well, you know, I don't know, we're talking about subcommittees, and I wanted to own up to the fact that I asked that it be created and it's done nothing, and so I need to know whether it has a place or not.
But the point you bring.
By the way, Rich, before I want to interrupt you, the footprint of downtown Boerne is less than La Cantera Shopping Center. So, just think about that.
Just skinny and long.
Reminds me of Breckenridge, Colorado.
But you were gonna say?
Yeah, to your point earlier, instead of building roads that then foster more commercial development, if the community wants a vibrant downtown, we just need to be able to get our residents from point A to point B in an efficient way that doesn't kill our quality of life, and as opposed to sprawl. And a lot of the complaints about the gateway was that it was a solution for traffic coming from other communities, and we were gonna pay the price for that. Our hill country was gonna pay the price for that. Well, let's be sure we plan something that's appropriate for county that will get to probably 90, maybe 100,000 people. Who knows, maybe more. But that's still, on the whole scheme of things, with 400 square miles, not a lot of density. I mean, heck, the town I grew up in was 73,000 people on 9 square miles. That's 1/40th the size of Kendall County, and that's double our population. So, I mean, you know, and we got around pretty good.
One thing that COVID did do, an advantage, is we now have the UDC zoning maps that we can build off of this a little bit, because we will have better ideas where the commercial will go, where the residential will go.
Industrial.
And we can build that up in.
That's my next meeting. It's not all, it's all.
Council member, is the UDC stuff gonna pass?
I think so.
It seems like it's been delayed a few times, got me worried a little bit.
I think we just gotta get zoning categories right, but yeah, I think so.
Okay, we have,
I'm good.
one more opportunity for public comment.
It's you.
You don't need to take it, but.
Okay, so.
Well, I have lots of things to say, but there are a couple folks I'd like to talk to individually, so we'll let it go with that.
Hey, Don, before you break, a shout out to Bryce's wife today at Currington Elementary. She had 20 third graders plant 3 trees.
It was a feat.
That's a feat.
Digging a hole.
With golden shovels, thank you.
John?
So, okay, we're going, this plan that we had, and I think it's still a good plan. What we need to do next, I guess, is flesh it out a little bit more, come up with cost. Because then we can start promoting if, you know, if something looks reasonable and we're gonna get the benefits, with public benefits, at what cost. And I think that's where we need to go next, so we know where we're going from there.
Okay,
So
I
now,
think we're going to have to do a little bit more work on identifying a few more projects, but I think.
well, and like I say, some of these here need to be fine tuned.
So who makes the request to Jenny? Is that Jenny? At Anho for the raw data, or for the?
Oh, Jeannie?
Jeannie, that's it, Jeannie, for the map data.
I've got that, I think. I know I do. I have to check my email. Do you want it?
I look at it too, right?
Okay.
I mean, we can put it on, you know,
Excel
put it
or
out there so
numbers
that
or
everybody
something,
can look
yeah.
at it, and somebody can come up with an idea of how to translate it.
Okay.
or
So you can see it.
Yeah.
Next meeting will be 2 weeks from today. No, today is the, it'll be the first Tuesday in May. 2 o'clock.
May the 4th.
Okay, we're good.
Be here or in the training. And we'll send out an agenda.
And thanks to our new scribe.
Yes.
You're still, you haven't stormed off and discussed yet, so we're pretty happy.
Smoke coming off my.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bob and Don.
Welcome,
Yeah,
good luck.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, sir.
The learning curve will be
Yeah.
pretty steep. Bill Bird candy.